'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, with little awareness that they'd soon be dead. Hello, my dear children, Merry Christmas. Your favorite spooky elf is here to deliver if you guys were dying for some Christmas-themed content. Or maybe Christmas isn't a good time for you and you just needed some company, so I'm sending all my love. Mwah. Today we are covering what is considered probably the most iconic Christmas horror movie of all time, Black Christmas. But not just the first one, because we will be comparing it to its 2006 and 2019 remakes. Big video today, folks. Let's just dive right into the structure. First, we cover historical impact, box office numbers, general behind-the-scenes information. Next, we break down the plot of each movie very briefly, and then I'll get into all the changes that each remake made. Then we'll do a character comparison, but because we're talking about three movies today, I'm just gonna stick to our final girls and our villains. After the characters, we'll be talking about the style in each movie, so the gore, effects, lighting, color palette, you name it. And the last topic of the day will be the themes that were presented in each movie. Were we meant to learn anything morally from these films, or were we just meant to be entertained? Then I'll wrap up the video with an overall comparison, and I will try to determine which is the superior film. We have a super interesting mix of movies today. The first one is just an all-time horror classic from the 70s. One is the perfect early 2000s horror time capsule, and one of them is a modern failed attempt at a feminist movie, so just oodles of topics to get into. So let's not waste any more time, let's get into the original Black Christmas from 1974. It was directed by a man named Bob Clark with a budget of $620,000. At the time, it only made $4.1 million in the box office, but if you adjust that for modern inflation, that would be roughly $23 million. And that's pretty exceptional for an indie film. Bob Clark took this project for the same reason that many directors took on horror movies in the 70s and 80s. Back then, horror movies were very low budget, and I guess in the industry they were kind of equated to pornos. So as a young director, if you wanted to break into the industry, you made one of the two. Bob Clark obviously chose horror. This movie also famously stars Margot Kidder and Olivia Hussey, who did some retrospective interviews that I watched. Olivia said this movie was reviewed very well at the time, and she thinks it was so successful because they didn't show too much on screen. She thinks that modern horror doesn't leave enough up to the imagination.
I mean, I just finished another horror film. I just love the people. Actually, horror films are more fun to do than the comedies.
Although she also said she's not a horror fan at all. Like, she said she couldn't even sit through a Friday the 13th movie, so take her opinion with what you will. I personally do agree with her though. Margot Kidder had some more interesting stories to tell, and she is a very funny woman as well. She had acted for a little while in LA, but because that wasn't really working out for her, she moved on to editing for a little while. So she came back to acting for this movie. She was also asked about some of the more crass dialogue in the movie, and her response to this was, again, very funny.
No, people were much less uptight in those days than they are now. I think these days you'd have all the damn Christians down your throat. You know, you couldn't do that scene of these days.
Along with that, she said that back then she feels like more people were willing to put themselves out there and experiment, and that's why she took this role, because she said it was, quote, outrageous. Like Olivia Hussey though, she is also not a horror fan. She said she loves that this movie became a cult classic, but she doesn't understand why. Also, this isn't really relevant, but please watch this.
The Exorcist came out, and then I went to see it, and I saw it. And once she came downstairs and peed on the carpet, everyone started laughing like crazy, and we just didn't stop till the movie was over. I think that was in Toronto or in New York. I can't, what a blur it all is.
She saw The Exorcist and thought that it was a comedy, and girl, same. I literally just said the same thing in my top 10 of the 70s video. But we have a lot to cover today, so I'm gonna keep each section a little bit more brief than usual because, again, we're covering 3 movies, not just 2. So let's move on to Black Christmas from 2006. It was directed by Glenn Morgan, who isn't really known for doing much else. With a budget of $9 million, they went on to make $21.5 million in the box office, which is pretty weird because that's worth about $30 million today, and you're gonna see why I thought that it would have been more successful. It starred Miss Lacey Chabert, aka Gretchen Wieners.
Oh, Katie, here you go. One for you. None for Gretchen Wieners. Bye.
By the way, did anybody know about the Lacey Chabert Lifetime Christmas movie cinematic universe? What is she doing? I truly would like to understand what's going on here. But the 2006 remake also stars Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who just queen of early 2000s horror, and she's still kicking ass to this day. Literally, you guys should watch Kate. It's a movie on Netflix. I think they partnered with a Japanese studio. It takes place in Osaka, and she just beats up a bunch of dudes. So very entertaining. I recommend that one. But back in the day, she was also simultaneously working on Final Destination 3. It also stars Michelle Trachtenberg, who I know best from Gossip Girl and 17 Again, but she was one of those faces that just popped up a lot in early 2000s movies. And the last cast member that I have to ramble about is Katie Cassidy, aka the missed opportunity of the century. I fell in love with her in the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. She easily could have been our generation's most iconic scream queen, but then where did she go? When the world needed her most, she vanished. So obviously the cast of this movie was ridiculously stacked when you consider the culture of the early 2000s, but this was done on purpose, and in fact Mary Elizabeth Winstead said that they purposefully cast all these really popular actors so you wouldn't be able to guess who the final girl was, because if they had only cast one iconic actress and not several actresses of a similar caliber, then you would just be easily able to guess who would survive, and they chose the right final girl for this movie, indeed. But this movie came out in the mid-early 2000s, it's just peak slasher remake era. I was surprised, honestly, to see that Michael Bay's name was not attached, because he worked on like every early 2000s remake. I was also surprised to see that Mark Cuban was apparently a producer. I didn't really know that he was involved in the world of cinema. I always thought that he just crushed young entrepreneurs' dreams for a living. James Wong of Final Destination was also a producer on this movie, so it's no wonder how they got the cast that they did. But the cutest bit of behind-the-scenes knowledge that I wanted to share is that Bob Clark was another producer on this movie, and so he visited set one day, and the director, having immense respect for Clark, made everyone stop what they were doing on set. And mind you, that's a huge deal, because on a big budget set, time is precious money. So he stops everyone and he makes them give Bob Clark a round of applause and was like, he is why we're all here today. That warms my little Grinch heart, because when you see someone doing a remake, you want them to have respect for the original. Oftentimes that is so painfully lacking, and so you know what? You go, Glenn Morgan.
For you, Glen Coco. You go, Glen Coco.
Look how seamlessly I referenced the same scene from Mean Girls twice. But the 2006 remake was received very poorly by critics. It currently has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 15%. I couldn't find too much information about the reception of this movie at the time of release, but I did find one article from 2006 on Dread Central, and they went in on this movie. They were like, they trade suspense for gore and shock factor, and the story writing is just plain awful. You get the point. So I think it's safe to say this movie has never really been looked kindly upon. And speaking of widely loathed remakes, let's now discuss Black Christmas from 2019. It was directed by Sofia Takal, who also has a writing credit. With a budget of now just $5 million, this movie went on to make $18.5 million in the box office. I'm honestly not surprised to hear that, given how much people hated the initial remake from 2006, and so they'd probably lost hope for a movie like this. I remember I didn't have any interest at all in this movie when it came out, and then sure enough, everybody hated it. And then I just fully forgot about its existence until I was sitting there thinking, oh yeah, I have to make some Christmas content. So I guess I'll start out with the reception, and spoiler alert, it's not good. It's not looking good. It has an average rating of 2.0 on Letterboxd, which Letterboxd is really what I use to gauge kind of the popularity of a movie, not Rotten Tomatoes, because Rotten Tomatoes just doesn't have a big enough sample size of opinions. And a 2.0 is bad. You can see that there are on average way more negative reviews than positive ones. Like, people were not having it. Despite us finally having a woman's take on the story, and it's starring the lovely Imogen Poots, and I adore her as an actress, by the way. You should see The Father if you haven't already, but I think she was 28 years old at the time of filming, and I just didn't buy it. Get people who are actually college-aged for college roles. It's not like you're casting high schoolers, and casting anyone under 18 means they only work X amount of hours on set because of those labor laws. You can work an early 20-something to the bone, so I don't know what the excuse is here. Other than that, for a popular kind of blockbuster horror remake, it had a very low budget. So the other biggest name in this movie would be Cary Elwes, who we know from Saw and The Princess Bride. The cast and crew was all interviewed as well, and so this was his reasoning as to why he took on this project.
One of the main reasons I was attracted to this project was because of the social comment it makes on the the Me Too movement.
We'll get into that in the theme portion of the video, just you wait. Slight spoiler, coming from someone who considers themselves a feminist, you know, equal rights, this movie was a real swing and a miss on that topic, but we'll get to that. Although because we're talking behind the scenes, this is what the director had to say about that.
And so I wanted to make a movie that felt similarly contemporary about women's issues today, and kind of that was the big thing for me about remaking this movie, was how do I make a movie that feels the way Black Christmas felt in 1974 in 2019.
So that was the main motivation behind making this movie. Other than that, I don't know if it's because it was a very low budget movie so they couldn't afford to do many behind the scenes featurettes, but I couldn't really find much else. So that's kind of disappointing, but now we can move on to our plot breakdowns. The original Black Christmas follows Jess Bradford, who is stuck in an unfulfilling relationship with Peter. He is less than pleased when she not only denies his marriage proposal, but also learns she plans to terminate her pregnancy. Her sorority house is on edge when they begin receiving threatening phone calls and some of the girls go missing. Later, when Jess is on the phone with police, they tell her the calls are coming from inside the house. She runs from the killer, getting stuck in the basement. When Peter comes looking for her, she believes him to be the murderer and kills him. When she lays sedated in bed, creaks in the house suggest Billy the killer may still be at large. In the 2006 remake, there are a lot of flashbacks to the past, so I'm just going to talk about the timeline of events chronologically, not how they appeared in the movie. Billy was born to a mother who hated him. When he was a very young boy, she had his father murdered and remarried. Trigger warning here, and I am absolutely not going to show this next part. When Billy's mother's husband couldn't perform for her and please her, she then went up to the attic where she had locked Billy all of his life, and 9 months later, she then gave birth to his sister daughter, and one day several years after that, he cracked and killed them all. In present day, he breaks out of prison and heads to his family home, which is now a sorority house. One by one, the girls are picked off until the grand reveal that Agnes has been murdering people alongside her brother dad. Kelly is hospitalized from her injuries, but Agnes and Billy come after her yet again. She fights her way to survival, leaving Billy impaled on the top of a Christmas tree like a grotesque Christmas star. And finally, in our 2019 remake, we follow Riley Stone at college when her sorority sisters begin to go missing. She and her friends perform a Christmas parody song calling out the frat boys' rape culture, which leads the boys to retaliate. Some of the girls are able to narrowly escape, and Riley decides to break into the frat house to destroy the founder's statue. Because plot twist, the boys in the frat house have been imbued with the founder's magic and become possessed in order to do his bidding. In the end, they're no match for the women who come busting through the door to save the day and kill the evil men. So lots to get into, very different plots in each movie, obviously. The original is very simple. I think that that's why the story worked so well. There's not a ton to get into there. I have to say it has my favorite ending by far. It's very spooky and implicit, like we leave not knowing if our final girl is gonna survive. It's very spooky and timeless because we never got a sequel, probably never will, so it will just always have that impact of, well, will she even remain the final girl? In the remakes, they obviously couldn't really do anything quite that simple because for a remake you have to change things up, and luckily both movies did, for better or for worse. I think that Billy's backstory was really disturbing and at times a hair unnecessary with how far they went, but I did find it really interesting. And we'll compare the character of Billy more soon, but I think that with him they did make that important change to the story. It added a lot more layers to the story, especially with his daughter's sister, and I like that the climax wasn't in the house, it was actually in the hospital. It was a pretty epic moment seeing Agnes and Billy's deaths. There were definitely some unnecessary additions to the story though. There's this whole subplot where her boyfriend Kyle has like filmed himself having sex with different girls before they started dating, and then his girlfriend gets pissed about it, and you know, porn was something that Bob Clark stupidly left out of the original. That was sarcasm, babes. But that plotline just didn't really go anywhere, like it didn't contribute anything. I also think the character that was one of the girl's sisters, I think it was like Claire's sister that came to look for her, she was a really pointless character as well. She kind of just added to the body count, which is normal for a slasher, but she wasn't even a sorority sister, like just add another sister to the house. It didn't really make sense. In the 2019 remake, they changed up the story a lot more. Now there's magic in the Black Christmas universe. Again, I do appreciate that it's very different to both the original and the first remake, but it's absurd. Sorry, but to have a crying statue be the symbolic element of misogyny is dumb. One thing that I do like about the movie, though, is the camaraderie of all of the sisters. In the original, this is not a point that's stressed, and then in the remake, the girls don't band together at all. Besides Kelly and Claire's sister, I guess, but again, that's weird, because it's like, she's not even a sister, whatever. This was the first Black Christmas movie to actually apply logic and say, hey, yeah, actually, a group of women could indeed easily kill a couple dudes. So I enjoy that common sense was employed in at least part of the story. But my favorite story by far is still the original, because I really can't say that at any point while I was watching the original I thought to myself, hey, this is good, but you know what it could use? Incest or magic. So I applaud the creativity and what they changed in both remakes, sort of, but the plot of the original is the simplest, it's the cleanest of all of them. I do have to admit that I find the plot of the first remake to be more interesting, but it's just not really pulled off that well. So story out of the way, we can now move on to our character comparison. Let's begin with our final girls, and starting off with Jess Bradford, who is a good final girl, but she's kind of a flat character. I really like her though because she does stand up for herself and she is a very solid fighter, because her annoying boyfriend is like, actually, you did not even ask me if you could have this abortion, and also we're getting married. And she's like, no bitch. I do wish that we actually could have seen her fight Peter in the end. That's a scene that I would have wanted to see, but it was probably spared for budgetary reasons, and it worked well either way. So overall, not too dynamic, but a strong woman. I like her. In the remake, we have Kelly Presley, who is the final girl, and I told you that they made the right choice with her. I was secretly rooting for her more than the others, even though I adore Mary Elizabeth Winstead, but her character was annoying in the remake. Kelly physically fought, like, a lot. She was tussling with the siblings up in the attic, and then she got stuck in a wall, and then she was hospitalized, but then still kicking ass. The only kind of backwards vibe that I got from her character is the fact that she was really shamey towards her boyfriend when she found out that he had videotaped himself with other women. Because from what I understood, I might not have been paying close enough attention to the dialogue, but from what I understand, he got these people's consent. So I personally don't see the problem with like where she was coming from being upset that he had filmed himself with other women, but also her being upset comes from the stigma against sex workers. So it's like, it's not really something you can fault the character for. Society has kind of been brainwashed for a long time to believe that sex workers are not worthy of respect, but that's a whole other thing to unpack, so let's just blow past that. In all other ways, she was 100% the best character of this movie. And then in the 2019 remake, we have Riley Stone, played by Imogen Poots, and she's fine. I say that a lot when I'm talking about remakes and whatever choices they make. I go, that's fine, it's fine. I personally found Riley Stone to be kind of stupid, but that was pretty much her only downfall. She's a good portrait of a survivor, and she exhibits the PTSD well. I mean, she's just a very talented actress. And I'm not saying she needs to be, but I would kind of prefer to have more cinematic moments with her character where I'm like, yeah, yes. But in fact, I think that some of the moments with her other activist sorority sisters kind of make her look bad. So the writing for her was a little bit weird, because in those moments it just felt like it was forced conflict to keep the story interesting. So beyond all of that, the most defining thing about her character is the fact that she was a victim. She was pretty much extremely one note until the very end of the movie, where she's like, all right, I'm gonna girl boss my sexual assault. I'm not a fan of girl bosses, I'm sorry. This movie was giving me MLM energy, and no, I will not elaborate. So my favorite final girl is hard to choose because I love the subtlety of Jess. She didn't even really have an arc in the movie. She was just like a strong, independent woman. Even in their very first scene together, she was like, Peter, you're just a bitch who's lucky I even told you I wanted to have this abortion. Also, we're breaking up. You fired. You fired. Absinthe. Oh my goodness, look who it is. It's the boy. He always visits when I'm filming now, don't you? I think he must really like you guys. Do you want to do the thumbnail with me? Okay, sorry. So Jess is great, but then when you compare her to Kelly, who we actually got to see physically fight some people, that was so badass. So like, it's kind of a tie for me between these two final girls. In terms of our villains, let's talk about the original Billy. Fun fact, Billy was not actually a character that was ever cast. It was always kind of a different person playing the shadowy figure, because we never end up knowing who he actually is. I mean, it's a very real situation what he did to these women, but he's very elusive. He's kind of just like this shadow man. Everything about him just induces the skin crawlies. I hate the stuff that he says on the phone. I hate his weird eyeball through the door. You know, he also obviously murders some people. I think he's way more iconic than a lot of people give him credit for, but you don't exactly have a mask or an outfit that you can throw on that's immediately reminiscent of Billy from the original. He's really just this shadow with a glass eye. We have more to talk about with him later, but all in due time. In the first remake, Billy is given some kind of skin condition that makes him yellow, and this serves positively no other purpose other than to be like, oh, he looks scary, I guess. But that's very cheap, and it also otherizes people that have different skin disorders. Like, how do you think people with jaundice feel after watching this movie? Oh, my very real skin condition was used to make somebody look scary. That makes me feel fantastic. And he kills people alongside his sister Agnes, who she is played by a cisgendered man. I shouldn't have to explain why that's bad. Like, we're all aware that that perpetuates the stereotype that trans people are violent criminals, right? Good. So the aesthetic choices of the villains are terrible, but putting that aside, I think that their backstory and their motivations were really interesting. He was pretty much unintentionally raised to be a killer, and his whole thing was also eating eyeballs. Oh, that's another thing that they included, cannibalism. The eyeball thing was an interesting theme. I think it was meant to be more of an homage to the original than to actually contribute to any of the meaning of the character. Fascinating, nonetheless. In the 2019 remake, we have no Billy, we just have men. Men bad and men useless. I'll choose the professor, who I guess was kind of like the head antagonist, but he was given literally no other traits besides being deceitful and evil. None of the men were fleshed out like real human beings, not even the guy that was meant to be like the only good guy of the movie. And because the characters were so polarized in this movie, like either good or bad, they were all very boring. So my favorite villain is 100% the original Billy. I think that he deserves more credit in the genre, or maybe I'm just new here, you know what I mean? But I feel like people talk about so many other villains besides him, and I have my comments section. I know what you people talk about. So that was a very easy victory for the original with Billy. So now it's time to talk about the styles of each movie. The style of the original, I think at this point, is very iconic for inspiring Halloween. The POV shots are legendary, iconic, groundbreaking, all of the above. In order to get the shot of him climbing into the house, they actually strapped a harness with the camera onto the body of the operator while he climbed up the side of the house. I also love the Christmas vibes of this movie. It's very cozy, classic American Christmas kind of moment. Also not a lot of gore. One of my only complaints about the style is that they kind of reused the same scare tactic over and over. We saw the girl with the bag on her head not once or twice, but I think 4 different times they used that to kind of be a scare in the movie. But that's really my only complaint, because I love the implicit style of this movie. Like, we already talked about how spooky the ending of the movie was, and I think that the intention with this movie is just doing everything in a very understated way, which is my favorite style because you pick up on new things every time that you watch it. Although that's not to say that there isn't a lot of merit to the style of dumb early 2000s slashers. So let's move on to the first remake. This movie just has a lot of energy. I love the look of the house. It's even warmer and cozier than the original movie. There's more snow outside, more decor inside, more of an emphasis on light. They used a lot of red and green lighting, which is sometimes used to play up the intensity of a moment, or green is often used to play up the disturbingness of a moment. And speaking of the disturbing elements of this movie, the mom cookies, Ay, Dios mío. I posted on Twitter right after that happened. The way that Goofy is like clutching the bed frame with his toes, I became so enamored with that gif that I used it twice in the same day. I mean, this is clever, no, when you're high and the movie has body horror. The gore and the nastiness of the remake was just on another level. We already kind of got into it story-wise as well with the whole incest thing, but they were also wrong for the mom cookies. That was overkill. Unique though, a good job for taking gore to new levels that make me want to throw up, I guess. Also, as I've stated, this movie is just the perfect early 2000s time capsule. They also use these bad boys in the phone call scenes. Back in my day, we used landlines to call our friends to schedule playdates. So I actually love almost all of the aesthetic choices of the remake. I'm not big on gore, but it got me, sure did. I can praise it for being really disgusting, because, you know, in our business, that's a good thing. Not really for me, but I know that a lot of people probably appreciate that who love gore. In the 2019 remake, the style is bubkiss. It is so flat. It has no Christmas charm. I think that the budget really shows in the moments when they're walking around the school or their house. The production design is just awful. Like, what is this? Like, the cinematography and the color correction does it no favors. Okay, I have to butt in because pause. Who did these decorations? Who? I just want to talk. Who's responsible? Who did this? They could have at least increased the saturation in post to bring out the colors a little bit more, but the whole movie is so flat. Not to mention a lot of the line delivery also seems really flat. It doesn't seem coached at all, except Imogen Poots, you know, she brings it 110% always. And I think that a movie with this kind of concept just deserved that better attention to detail. So I'm not sure which style I prefer. Again, it's between the original and the first remake. I love the lighting and the use of color in the remake. I think that the Christmas vibes are the strongest. But in the original, the house is in that older style. It's just more of that classic American Christmas vibe. So it's hard to say, and literally the only reason why I wouldn't just flat out say that I prefer the style of the remake is because gore is really not my thing. Not a single thing is understated in that movie, so it's a bit much for my taste buds. So I guess the style winner would probably be the original. And finally, we have to talk about what we learned, the themes. There were a lot of layers to unpack with the original. First of all, what it's most commonly known for, its feminist undertones. It executed them flawlessly. I have no notes. It preyed upon the fear that women experience daily and some of the casual oppression that we experience from men all the time. By casual oppression, I mean it's the little things where it's like, hey, I'm getting an abortion, and he's like, well, you didn't even ask me first. Like, the fact that it's still second nature to a lot of men in this society to think that their opinion matters when it comes to us and our bodies, absurd. I love the way that she leaves no room for argument. She's very matter of fact.
I'm gonna have an abortion.
You can't make a decision like that. You hadn't even asked me.
I wasn't even gonna tell you.
I want to talk to you tonight.
There's nothing to discuss, Peter.
It's not like in the remake where you feel like the main character is trying to write a sociology paper with her dialogue. Because the way that Jess did it, that's how you treat men that don't stay in their lane. You just shoot them down, move on, next. For example, I screenshot and make fun of a lot of the men that comment gross out-of-pocket stuff in my comment section, and then I just mute them. She didn't give a fuck what that man had to say concerning the choices she was making about her own body. We stan Miss Jess. And I also think that it's really interesting that Jess thought that Peter was Billy because he easily could have been. I mean, I was even fooled. I thought that it was for sure Peter. It is definitely not unheard of for men to kill their partners or otherwise abuse them because they don't go along with their wishes. So I kind of love what Billy represents because sometimes the call really is coming from inside the house. And the fact that it's a horror movie first and that's kind of the subliminal layer is the right way to do it. Because it is saying so much, you just have to do a little bit of work to unpack it. In the remake from 2006, it's, you know, it's all about family. Kind of. I don't know. The 2006 remake is pretty much just a straightforward slasher. In the behind the scenes, the director said something about how he wanted to be making a commentary about privacy and how we're like always being watched. And somehow this was kind of expanding upon the themes of the original movie. And I'm kind of like, you know, Glenn, did you not understand the point of the original? Because with the whole privacy thing, I'm sorry, partner, that's just not coming through. I feel like he was kind of just saying that, you know, trying to put forward a little bit more meaning into his project. But sometimes a movie doesn't need to have a message. It's fine. You can make a straightforward, cheesy slasher, and that has a lot of value too. It's fine to be head empty sometimes and just enjoy watching a man bake his mother's skin into cookies. That's fine. But the opposite is true for our 2019 remake. Oh boy. They went super overkill girl boss mode, trying to men are all evil us to death. The single worst line of dialogue is right here during the climax of the movie.
Don't you see? Break us, and you only break yourselves.
We will never be broken.
Really, dude? You needed to say that right now, right as all these men are literally killing your sisters and you're just holding their power source in your hands? I was on board with a lot of the movie leading up to this ending though. I thought, okay, it's really on the nose, but the movie is bold. That's fine. And I think that some parts were really well intentioned. Like there's the part where this girl runs in and she's like, I can't find my diva cup. And then she just shoves it right in front of her friend. Also, not to be that guy, but like, how is there not blood on her hand? I've personally never really done that in front of anyone before. I don't know if that's really a thing that girls do, but they're trying to destigmatize the fact that we do have to shove a cup up our vagina once a month. It's good. Desensitize people to that. I like what you're doing there. My biggest issue is the fact that none of the characters were really super fleshed out, least of which the men, who are basically just like wind-up toys who are powered by the tears of their dead founder. I found this really problematic because I feel like it can do damage to real-world movements like the Me Too movement. Because with a lot of the frat boys' actions in the movies, like, yeah, it was realistic to real life. Men in the real world can be that awful. And I swear to God, if any of you say not all men, you're muted. Goodbye. Frat houses perpetuate rape culture more than any other fucking organization in the world. And maybe except for like the US government, allegedly, But see how this shit is systemic? Hopefully we're also all aware of like the frat house to politician pipeline, yeah? But by giving them this mumbo jumbo cult kind of power, it just further mythologizes a lot of the real stories that women tell about men like this. The magic vibe is kind of taking away from the very real crimes that men commit. And the very real violence against women. I guess it's good that in this movie, at the minimum, the men seem to be lucid while they would be committing their atrocious acts. But I think that regardless of that, a lot of the meaning is stripped away once they're being possessed by their almighty founder from beyond the grave. The moral about women banding together is good. I think that they were on the right track with that. But it became this really fluffy, mystified girl boss moment, and I don't like it. Because then old dumb fucks will watch the movie and they'll be like, it's just the PC culture, it's the woke culture. Placing all the blame on how women dramatize these situations, because this movie is heavily dramatized, obviously, with the magic involved, instead of looking inwards at themselves and how they themselves may or may not perpetuate rape culture. Oh, I'm ranting a little bit. This is why I do not enjoy ranting, because I am sweating now. I mean, it's kind of cathartic though, because I get my thoughts out there and then you guys have to deal with them. But on that very awkward note, maybe let's just move on to the overall comparison. Obviously, the 2019 remake can fuck off. It's not in the equation. Imogen Poots, I love you, but just choose a better one next time. And I'm not trying to vilify anybody that likes the 2019 remake. Like, there is entertainment value. You like what you like. I just personally had the movie ruined for me with the whole magic plot twist. So it's between 2006 and 1974, and I think that there is just a lot of very different things for horror fans to love in each movie, and it just comes down to what you're looking for. I think that these will both become annual watches for me. Like, I really want to find them on Blu-ray or something because I love them both. The remake just has some unsavory elements that, now that I'm aware of them, I'll definitely try to avoid the next time I watch it. It's a bit problematic, but you know, let's get you the ability to criticize media and still enjoy it. If you're in the mood for campy slasher fun and you want really warm, cozy Christmas vibes, the remake from 2006 is definitely going to be the superior film for you. If you want actual spine-tingling suspense with a strong singular lead, then the original is definitely superior for you. Another thing that I like to ask myself with these comparisons
comparisons is how do I feel about it on a rewatch. The first couple times I watched the original, I have to admit my eyes did glaze over a bit. I got pretty bored by it, and my eyes still do glaze over when I get to the second act, but the third time was the charm. I actually really loved it this time that I watched it, and I did just rank it really low on my top 10 list of the 70s, so don't come for me, okay? I've had a change of heart, and I don't know what I wasn't seeing before. I think it's because the first time I watched it, I was watching it back home in LA on my really small little TV, and so it just didn't have as much impact. It also might have been daytime, I don't know. My point is, I think that it was just the wrong setting, and this time I watched it, you know, here at home in my parents' house, got the big TV surround sound, watched it at night by myself, so that definitely impacted my viewing experience. I've only seen each of the remakes once, so I don't really think that it's really a fair comparison, but as of now, my personal favorite would have to be the original, but it all comes down to personal preference, baby. So let me know how you feel down below. What is your preference? Maybe give me your ranking of these movies. For me, it's 2019, 2006, and the winner being 1974. Or let me know what you're doing this fine Christmas. At this point, I am probably getting drunk off White Claws with my family. But I'd like to know, sending my love. I hope that you guys are all doing well. I have to send a little bit of extra love to my patrons. I love you guys. You get your kisses. Mwah, 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 mwah. If you would like my kisses in every single video, you can sign up for my Patreon, linked down below. You're gonna get some extra content over on my Patreon pretty soon. I'm actually gonna film that today. I'll be reacting to my most anticipated horror movies of 2021 video, so it'll be interesting to see how excited I was for things and how let down or, you know, how surprised I was by things. You get it. That'll be on my Patreon soon. All my other social media is linked down below. Have a happy holidays, whatever you're celebrating. Take care of yourself, and we will get through these holidays together. Bye!